Bienvenidos to Conversaciones con Alpha New Jersey podcast. Each episode, I, Vanessa Schwippert, will be interviewing different Latinas or allies to share their experiences so that our listeners can be in community with us and hopefully learn a thing or two. Enjoy! Hi, Zarafshan. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm so happy that you joined Conversaciones con Alpha podcast.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for picking me for the podcast.
Well, it was an easy pick, Zarafshan, because you're very kind, you're very nice to work with. So I'm like, who do I want on the podcast? And obviously, I
I
chose
think it's
you.
I think it's my chit chat. I think just being able to chit chat across the board. I'm an easy pick. I'd like to say that. So all
Yeah,
good. Thank you for picking me.
I
I'm
love
excited to be here.
I love that. So, first thing I want to start off with is how do you pronounce your name? Because I hear a lot of Zara, Zara, Zarafshan. So, how do you what's your preference?
Yeah, so I do prefer to go by Zarafshan. So it's Zarafshan. If it is a shortened version, I prefer to go by Zara, but first preference is always for Zarafshan.
I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. So, the first thing that I do with every single guest is I'm going to read your bio and then ask you how you feel about it. Are you
Absolutely.
ready?
Yes, I think.
Okay. So you are a business manager at JP Morgan Chase, supporting their asset wealth management treasury and solutions finance business, focusing on balance sheet management, capital management, and quant modeling. Outside of day to day tasks, you're involved with JP Morgan's Roundtable Empowering Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ready network. You have also been a member of Alpha for almost 5 years as a student leader of the Alpha chapter at Rutgers University and now as vice president for Alpha New Jersey. You're the daughter of two Pakistani immigrant parents. You were born and raised in New Jersey, first generation and first female within extended family to graduate from college. You graduated from Rutgers Business School with a BS in finance and leadership management, summa cum laude. You enjoy being creative through painting, pottery, arts, crafts, and dancing. You love to cook different cuisines, and you're a foodie. Your favorite being potatoes and burgers. Sames, I love that. You're proud of your heritage and are passionate about making an impact in the community for women in and those in need. You are excited to continue to pay it forward and inspire others to go beyond their and others' expectations and break any and all stereotypical boundaries. So how does that make you feel?
I feel like it's a nice journey to look back at it, right? It's always when I think about having put together my first bio, I would always work on these initiatives, right? And go to events and I'm like, people, I need your headshots and I need your bio. But when it came to me putting together my first bio for the first time, I'm like, I think I'm getting there. I think I'm headed in the right direction to do something that I like doing and I enjoy doing. So it feels great to have someone read my bio back to me, right? When we're putting things like this together, you don't really pay much attention to all the work that you have done, but hearing it back from someone is definitely a great feeling, great validation. And I think it describes me in a nutshell, right? It talks about just being able to come from a different background, coming from the different heritage that I have, right? And being welcomed into the community and again with open arms. It feels very, very great to hear it back. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm headed in the right direction, a little bit of accomplishment at a time. So we're getting there.
I love that. Yeah, it's very I want to say I feel like it made me proud to know you, to have all of your accomplishments and to learn a little bit about you. So, I love that. What got you involved with Alpha to begin with? I know it's a Latina org and you're from Pakistan, so what drew you to Alpha?
Plain and simple. Do you have a resume and do you want to make new friends? That's the one sentence that literally drew me over to Alpha. So, when I was at Rutgers Business School, I was in my sophomore year, and a friend of mine who had gone to high school with, he was a year older, he was at one of those student org fairs that usually the college puts together. And he said, hey, come visit our booth and I'll introduce you to a couple people. Do you have a resume if you're going in the business field? And do you want to make new friends? And I'm like, yes, I need help making a resume. And yes, I need new friends because a lot of my friends didn't go to the Newark Business School and they had gone to different colleges. So I knew those are the two key things I did need. I felt like I won't say wasted, but I didn't make much resource out of my freshman year. So I knew going into sophomore year, I definitely had to use my time more usefully. So it was just a matter of a friend letting me know about who Alpha was, what they did, and he said, "Just join us. You'll make new friends." And I'm like, "Okay, sure. You have me hooked." And since then, it's been a journey, and now I think we're going on year 6. So I've been reeled in very, very well, but that's how it started.
I love that. You're very impactful with the Alpha community in Alpha, New Jersey, and you're part of the reason why. And you know what? When this episode airs, everyone will know that we won Alpha, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
Alpha chapter of the year. So that's part of you're part of that. Like you made that happen, your contribution. So
I'm your
congratulations to you.
contribution. Oh,
How exciting, right?
super exciting. I think it's when I was sharing with the team, and I think I shared with you as well, that when you go on stage once at the Alpha convention, you want to have that feeling over and over again. So our first time we had gone was in Orlando, and since then I'm like, listen, now I got the vision. I see the impact. I like that feeling of being able to go on stage with everyone and being able to get that recognition, right? Because we all really work throughout the entire year to put our events together to be able to make an impact in the community, and just having that recognition on a larger scale across all the chapters at convention, it's a completely different feeling. So congrats to you as well, right? Like, you're part of this initiative, you're part of our chapter, and just again, all working towards one goal and making sure that we're making an impact in the community. So it's a joint effort, 100% a joint effort.
I love that. I feel like I don't recognize it as my contribution because I started with Alpha New Jersey in the events team. So that's a lot of behind the scenes
Right.
stuff. And then now I'm doing the podcast. And, I think this is our third episode. We're in July, but it's not being released until September. So my contributions are like not
We see it in
super.
other ways, Vanessa. We 100% see it in other ways. You are the master behind some of the reels that we're putting on our social medias. You're definitely helping a lot with execution and planning of events. So you are definitely part of the success. So don't think that it's only related to the podcast. And I'm sure once the podcast goes live, everybody's going to see the amazing work you've done. So
Well, I
thank you. Thank you for being on the team.
I appreciate your kind words. You're supposed to be the guest. This is supposed to be about you, Zarafshan.
Right? It takes two to tango, right? It takes
Yes.
two to tango all the time.
Yes. Perfect. So I want to talk about a little bit more about your family because I have an older sister. We have the same mom. And then I have a younger sister. We have the same dad. So I'm a younger sister and I'm the older sister, but I'm not a middle child. And so that's just a, very unique situation that I'm in. But you are the oldest sibling there are five of you, right?
Yes.
Right. I'm curious, how do you think that has shaped you as a person and, like personally and also professionally?
Yeah, so yes, I'm one of five. I'm the oldest. I have two brothers and two sisters, so semi balanced if you take myself out of it. And it's a wholesome. I will say it's a wholesome. It's a great experience to have that many people at home and just having siblings and family that has always been so supportive. Not every day is the same, and I always say you can hear my birds, you can hear my family in the background when I'm taking some of these work and alpha calls, but they are all part of the journey, right? I actually had family over last night, and my aunts and uncle were visiting from Mississippi, and they don't get to see the day to day that I do, but I was sharing with them about, some of the work that I do for Alpha, and they said, "We're so proud of you," right? And I had to take a moment back and think about it, and I said, I'm glad, right? It's always great to hear that and get that validation from someone, but it's been a journey, right? Being the oldest hasn't been the easiest. Coming from a different background, right? So our family's from Pakistan. Both my parents were from Pakistan, had moved here relatively in their young adulthood. I think my mom was 19 when she moved to the States, and my dad was a bit older. He's probably in his late 20s when they had come here. But since then, it's always been a lot of making sure that we optimize on the opportunities that they didn't get to optimize on, right? And I think just being the oldest, there was a lot of expectations for myself and making sure that we're setting the right standard for the rest of my siblings to kind of look up to. My parents were also very hesitant about certain things, and whether it was going away for college, that was not on the table, right? Because again, they were so hesitant about it, they didn't know if that was going to be something that would work. So I would say it has shaped me. I feel like I had to build very thick skin, just being the oldest, and making sure that one, I am doing everything I can do in my power to make sure I'm setting the right stage for myself and working on those opportunities. Those opportunities were not going to come to me. I had to find them, and I had to work on them myself, rather than having someone there that was going to be able to guide me, right? And I think that comes across the board for many of us who are first gen. But then I also think it's, the pressure was there to make sure I do well, right? Because I have four other siblings who are going to be on the lookout for me. So between three of them, we're relatively close in age. I would say the closest being 2.5 years apart, and then the middle one being 5 years apart. The youngest one, he and I are 10 years apart. So that one, I was like, okay, I 100% know things will be much, much different when he comes into the picture. But at least for the other three, right, making sure that I was setting up myself for a successful figure, so that they would also be able to mirror that. So I would say it's been a journey, right? Personally and professionally, there's a lot that goes behind the scenes to make sure that, one, I'm able to put myself out there. It's not the easiest, especially in the field that we're in, as well as being a woman of color, right? Our family's from Pakistan, and not sure how much people know or see of in the media, right? But a lot of the countries in the Middle East, women don't get the opportunities that we tend to get here in the States, right? People back home, or most women, don't pursue further studies, let alone being in the business field, or even being in a male dominated field and working in finance. So that's not even something that women think about back home. So just having some of those experiences in the background from a cultural perspective, just the thought processes, because my parents grew up in Pakistan, bringing that all here, and then still being first gen, putting myself out there and working on those opportunities, it's been a journey, right? But I've also been very, very fortunate with the people that I've met along the way, whether it was our alpha familia people, my mentors, my coaches, just friends and family in general. Everyone has just been so supportive that it's grown me into a person that, when I look back, I'm like, yes, I'm proud of who I am today, and I know there's a very, very long way to go to continue to become an even more stronger leader and a stronger woman.
No, I think a lot that will resonate with a lot of people, what you're saying with having that cultural expectation or those cultural norms and balancing that with the opportunities that we have here in the United States, like you were saying, you're not allowed to, like I was not allowed to live or go far, right? But now that I moved to Texas, it's like, oh my God, but so much has changed, for everyone, women and in the United States, and I'm sure even in Pakistan and Colombia, everything has changed just in our lifetime. I'm thinking of, I'm Colombian, so I'm thinking of Colombia in the 90s versus now. It's almost night and day in a lot of ways. We do still have a lot of ways to go, but I think through people doing the things that we are currently doing, I think that pushes the envelope, and that pushes our demographic, further to where we want it to be. So I think it's really important what you're doing. And I think it resonates with a lot of people, here in the US that are first gens and navigating these spaces for the first time. So you're not alone.
Mhm. No, and I appreciate it. And just to hit on something you said, right? There has been a lot of progression from where we were, a few decades ago to where we are today. A lot of that mindset has shifted, not only in Pakistan but across the Middle East as well, right? We hear about the progresses, but there's a long way to go. I actually take online classes, and my professor is based in Pakistan. And when we had first started on that journey, I've been with that same professor for almost 8 years now. And when we first started, he would point out very directly, I'm not really understanding the way you're speaking, and I'm not understanding your mindset, right? Because he comes from a completely different mindset. He grew up, was raised in Pakistan, lives there, where we were born and raised here in the States, especially in New Jersey. So, it's been, even for myself, to be able to interact with someone like that and share my thought process with him, and making sure that, I share with him things that he should bring home, and I'm like, listen, you should tell your wife this, or you should do this for your daughters. So it's a journey, right? We all have to take it one step at a time, but as long as we're doing some contribution to it, right, to what you said, it's just being able to shift that envelope, even if it's in the slightest way, it makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And are you familiar with the Spanish saying, ni de aquí, ni de allá?
Not entirely, but tell me more about it.
Okay, so ni de aquí is like I'm not from here, ni de allá, and I'm not from there either. And so it's that sentiment what you're just describing with your professor, right? Where it's like he has this whole entire culture of being 100% born and raised in Pakistan, hasn't left. And then you are from there, but in the United States. So it gives you that feeling of disconnect from both being in the US and also your culture in Pakistan. And so there's a saying specifically with first gens like Latinos that we say that, and it's just a universal thing, like we're saying for first gens, which I think it can be used as a superpower. When we go into these workforces, you being a woman of color from Pakistan, this is like your uniqueness and something that's so special to you that when you come into a room, you're sharing like that culture and that part of you, and that's value. The more diverse the group, the more diverse the participants in the room, it's going to elevate the conversation or the project or the outcome. I think we can really use this. A lot of times we view it as we're different, we're not like them, we're outsiders, but I don't think that's the case. It's special and it's something, good to bring into the room.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep going on this, but
No,
you
go.
hit great points, and I want to talk about it, right? Because I remember, and I'm sure, Vanessa, you in itself, you could relate to this as well, because I feel like, just exactly to what your quote said, right? You're neither here, you're neither there. And I hear that all the time, right? Especially when I interact with my professor, he's like, well, you're not entirely Pakistani because you were born and raised in America, so you're an American. But then I'm like, but yes, I am, right? Because that's part of my heritage and that's my culture. Yes, I am American because I was born and raised here, and this is also part of who I am. But I bring both colors and both cultures to the table. And I remember when I was younger, we were in school, and especially when you're at that age, you're like 6, 7, 8, maybe very early on in elementary school, you don't want to bring that to the table, right? Because you think about, I look different from the rest of the group. Thankfully, I grew up in both towns that I've been in have been very diverse, and you do get to see people not entirely like us, but different people of different backgrounds. So thankfully, I have lived in diverse towns where I didn't have to face any difficult times like that. But that was always something that came up, right? Like we didn't want to talk about, I didn't want to talk about who I was, right? I didn't want to talk about Pakistan and where our family was from, because a lot of times, just from facial appearance, right? Physical appearance, people would say you're Indian. And nothing wrong with being from India or being associated from India, right? We're all one big space. But I'm not Indian, right? I'm from Pakistan. And there's a difference between the two from a cultural perspective, religious perspective, just who we are. And that's part of who I was. Um, but as I grew up, the more and more I embraced my culture, I'm like, yes, that's who I am. Take it or leave it. I bring that color to the table. I'm not just another individual, just another woman who's just from New Jersey, right? Yes, that's part of me. But dig a little bit deeper and you'll get to know all the things that my Pakistani culture has that I could bring to the table, right? And I think that's why I fit in so well with the Latino community, because there's so many similarities between our cultures as well, just being very loud, welcoming, vibrant. So the more you learn about the different cultures, the more you see the similarities and the more you feel part of that community. So I think, again, you hit a great point, and I would love to hear what you think about it as well, because I know that you've shared with me that you have had similar experiences as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, especially with my last name. And I am half white. My dad was born and raised in New Jersey. My grandmother was from Brooklyn. My grandfather was from Germany. So I am half white. And so when people look at me, they're like, "Oh, you're Colombian." It's like I'm also white though. And like look at my last name, if people look at me, if I don't tell you I'm Colombian, you're not going to know. And then because of my personality, it's like the first thing that comes out of my mouth. I have it like tattooed on my body. It's all over, my platform on my podcast. So it's a very big part of who I am, because I think that, to your point, when people mistakenly call you Indian, it's not about anything negative about Indian. It's the dismissal of your identity, right? And it's like, being in the US, we kind of have to hold on to anything that we can, whether it's the food, the language, the cultural norms, our identity, how we like literally how we identify. It's like, no, I'm not Indian. I'm, Pakistani. I'm not just white. I'm Colombian. It's it's the dismissal of your identity that's the issue, and that we need to really clarify. And I think that we honestly, through this conversation, we just came up with a new saying where it's like, de aquí y de allá, from here and from there. Like,
There. Yes.
we're here and from there. We're both, actually.
Right.
It's not
Right.
neither, it's both. I think duality is super important.
I love that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
learn that and I will start using it as well.
I'll message you it, because also I have a Colombian accent when I say it, so I'm sure if other people said it, it would sound a little different. What are some important life lessons that you think that you learned from your family? What are some of the most important lessons you learned from your family, and what are some do's and don'ts?
Great question. A very loaded question, so I do appreciate it. I think cultural background definitely brings great perspective into how we are shaped as individuals, right? Or even just as leaders. I think the one thing that I did learn very quickly, and I'm not sure if it's just a cultural thing or just part of my upbringing with my parents being from Pakistan, but just the opportunities that they had, right? Versus when they came here. So both my parents come from a background where, again, we're born and raised in Pakistan. Education, at least for women, wasn't top priority. My mom did push through the norm, so she I think she actually has a double master's, but in Pakistan. So she always knew that that was something that was top priority for her. Super smart woman. Till this day, she can do all these percentages in her head, and she's like, "Oh, I got the price of this, and you do this," and I'm like, I could never, and I don't think I will ever be able to do that. But the one thing that she made sure to like drill in us to full capacity was the importance of education, right? Because when she was in Pakistan, she wasn't forced to give it up. And that's why she was able to pursue her education, but she wasn't able to execute on it. She wasn't able to take much use out of the education that she had gotten, right? She wasn't able to work after that. She got married very soon after she had graduated, and then soon after that she came to the States. So she wasn't able to apply much of that education towards building a career for herself. But when she did come here, the two things that she said to us was, you could do anything you want in life, just make sure that you are educated. And education was top priority across the board. Like, we had to make sure we were straight A students, because if that was not the case, then it was time for a chit chat. So education, I think, was 100% one of the things that she put well in us, and I know for a fact that we're all going to take it forward for our future as well. Just how important it is, whether you're able to execute on the educational piece or not. Just the fact that you were able to put yourself out there, have gone through the school systems, and have been able to just have at least a backbone to yourself, right? In the future, when you think about it, and I go back to Pakistan and I think about the women there, some of them, not being from an educational background, now have children, and they wish that for their children, but it becomes very difficult for them because they haven't gone through that process and they're not able to relate with their children. But I think just having us gone through that system of education, and pursuing what we wanted to pursue, I think that's 100% one thing that I'm going to keep. I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing or more of my parents having that as part of our upbringing. So 100% education is very important for me, and I, again, for everyone in our household, and I'm sure I will have that be something that I carry forward as well, and making sure I focus on an educational piece. The one thing that I would let go of, I would say, not necessarily something that I was forced into, but we kind of hit it a little bit before, right? With women in Pakistan not having much educational background, not really pursuing any careers per se. There's a very small percentage of women that are, again, now with the norm changing and things getting better, we're seeing a lot of it more. But that I would 100% would say one thing that I do let behind of that culture is that mindset that women and men are different. Yes, we are different, and I recognize that men and women are not the same, but that doesn't mean from a gender perspective that we don't have the same rights. Men have a right to education, to career, so do women. So I think that's the one thing that I 100% do not take from my culture at all, that women are supposed to be at home, they're supposed to be caregivers, they're more family oriented than, self and leader oriented. And I shared it before as well. When my aunts and uncle were here to visit last night, they had said, we're so proud of everything that you've been doing. But then in the background, they're always thinking about, yes, you can't take. So one thing that we always say is you can take the person out of Pakistan, but you can't take Pakistan out of them. So I feel like that mindset is always going to be in the background for everyone. That's kind of the thing that I want to shift. I'm not saying that I want to let go of my culture entirely. I love and appreciate all of Pakistan, and it brings in a lot of my personality, and I love every piece of it. But just that mindset is not something that I'm always 100% on board with. But again, things are changing, and it's in our own hands to be able to change that, or change the message of how people are viewing you.
100%. And I think I totally agree with what you just said about how it's in our control to make sure that that shift happens, because even it's not just Pakistan, like even in the US, Latinas make up 3%, or I think 3 or 4% of the entry level positions in the US, and 2% of the managerial positions in the US, and 1% of C-level executives in the US. So it's not about Pakistan, it's not about Colombia, it's just about making those shifts. And I just really appreciate that in it seems like everything that you do, you're always keeping your culture and your country in mind and bringing them with you as you come up and as you continue to progress. You're not forgetting them. You're not saying this is my mom's thing, this is behind me.
Right.
You're thinking of them and doing a lot for them. And I think that that's really powerful, and I think very impactful. So I also do that, and I love that you're doing it. It's hard work, but we're doing it.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's, again, we can't change things overnight, but as long as we're taking one step in the right direction, it will take a lot of people, it will take a lot of time. But as long as I'm doing my part, and I'm able to say, like, yes, I'm making a difference, I'm not falling into the same trap that maybe someone else has fell into, that makes me sleep well at night. So I'm happy with it. I know that you're doing the same as well. I'm happy, and I'm very proud of all the women that are actually taking things into their own hands and being able to change that mindset or change the situations that they're in.
Appreciate it. So what do you have what's a goal that you have for yourself, your future self? Not necessarily where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years, but just in general, what's a goal maybe that you have for yourself? Where do you see yourself?
Good question. I'm glad you didn't ask me about what's my 5 year plan and what my 10 year plan is, because I don't think I have a plan in place just yet. I think the one thing that I've realized just being in corporate America and just continuing to grow as a leader in the space is really a go with the flow mindset, but still having some level of high level arching goals that I have. I'm not entirely sure what my next step is going to be. I know that I do want to continue to stay in corporate America, and especially in the role that I have at the moment, I do really enjoy it. So I do see myself staying there. Longer term, I think the one thing that I always share with everyone, whether it's at home, with my friends, with my Islamic professor, and I would say he's a great reminder of it as well. He always reminds me, oh, this is what you wanted to do, right? So you got to make sure you keep doing it. And it's a funny story, because I'm not sure how many people I've seen, but on my LinkedIn, I have part of my short background. I wrote a very small note there that when I was younger, I always wanted to, again, we went to New York, and I would see these very fast paced people just going about their day. And I'm like, I don't know what they do, but I want to do that. Whatever they're running towards, I want to do what they're doing. But the one thing that I always wanted to, and I always said, was I just want to be CEO, right? I want to be CEO of the world. I don't know what I'm going to be the CEO of, but it has to be CEO of something. And I think that's I would say, in the back of my mind, it totally sounds insane. You cannot be CEO of the world. But as a young girl at the time, it made total sense. It was something that still keeps me going, and I still share it with my sisters, with my family, and I let everybody know I am not stopping my journey. I am not stopping my drive until I get CEO of something. Now, if that's a CEO of, I don't know, I said I love food, right? So if that's a CEO of becoming of like a pizza joint or a cafe, it has to be CEO of something. I'm not stopping until that kind of comes under my belt. And I think it's a great way to continue to motivate me, because it helps me just remember there's nothing stopping me. There's no hurdles in the way. There's nothing that I cannot do. And that's the mindset that I have. You will see me like climbing on top of anything and cleaning out those fans and climbing on top of cars to get what I need, right? And I will do all that hard work from a physical perspective. I will do all the work from a just working perspective, and growing myself as a leader, pushing myself to, again, something like this is not something that would ever be my first choice, but still saying yes to it and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. There's nothing that I can't do. There's nothing that women can't do. And I think having that CEO mindset in the back of my head, that's something that I want to do, and I'm not stopping until that happens. I think that's always that one goal, no matter where all my other goals sit, that will always be number one on the list. And it just keeps me going and going and going to work towards those goals. So I don't know. Again, I'm not sure where the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years are going to take me. But whether it's 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, as long as I don't stop and until I don't get that CEO thing of something, I'm not stopping.
That's amazing. I can definitely see you being a CEO of something. And I think that a lot of the times when you're the CEO of something, or a business in general, it's not so much, like the business. It's the CEO, it's the leader, it's the person driving the plane, it's the person that's deciding everything and putting all of that work into it. And so I think investors are going to invest in you. Well, no matter what the business is, customers are going to come because of you. It doesn't matter what the business is. So I'm looking forward to that. And whatever you decide, if it's the restaurant, I'll eat there. If it's like car insurance, I got your car insurance. Whatever you're going to do,
Right.
I'll be there. So I'm
It's
looking
gonna
forward
be
to that.
something. It'll be something, and you'll be the first I share it with.
I can't wait. We'll have to do another episode on it when we get
We
there.
will. We will.
Yeah. And the last question that I have for everyone is, what is some maybe advice that you have for your younger self?
Mm, great question. I think I would just tell myself back in the day to push myself out of my comfort zone. I'll be very honest, the person I was at home very early on was not the same person that I was at school, or was not the same person I was at work. I felt like I always had to kind of just keep my home self separate from my corporate self. Not saying that you shouldn't do that. There's a corporate us, and there's a friendly us, and there's a home us, but it shouldn't be drastically different. So if I could go back in time, I would definitely tell myself, continue to step out of your comfort zone, do things that you don't feel comfortable with, and just keep saying yes. Network as much as possible, right? And again, I say that to my corporate side of me. Network as much as I can and across the board with whoever it is. And then again, to my personal self, I'll just say, keep doing what you're doing and push yourself out of your comfort zone. It never hurts to say yes. What's the worst that can happen? The person might just say no, right? And once I kind of wrap that around my head, that what's the worst that can happen, I think things have gotten much, much easier after that. Again, two things: continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone and say yes. And then two, just keep networking from a professional standpoint.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. I feel like the listeners are going to really connect with a lot of the things that you were saying and learn about you and just enjoy it if anything. So I appreciate you being on Conversaciones con Alpha New Jersey.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. And I'm super, super excited. And I hope that when our audience hears of this, that they're able to relate to it. But again, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Conversaciones con Alpha New Jersey podcast. For more information on today's episode, please take a look at the episode description below. For updates, resources, and future events in the area, please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at alpha_NJ. You can also follow and subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify at Conversaciones con Alpha NJ. Gracias, and see you next month.